This is a book on holy warfare, the church and the bomb. Capability of godlike reason. Nuclear war. Great public questions have a way of behaving like an undulant fever. Their intensity and imminence rises and falls according to some hidden reason. Eventually, they either become obsolete when circumstances are seen to have so changed that they are meaningless, or else they break the surface of decision or are left behind as the thing settled. I have a premonition that the question of Britain's nuclear armament is not only rising towards peak intensity, but is time approaching the point of decision. So I would like to look at when this book is published. It's about 1983. So at 1983, they only to discuss about the question of nuclear weapons of Britain. The nuclear weapons was used once in war. It was used in circumstances where bear no comparison with the present. It was used to shorten a war of which the foreseeable outcome could no longer be reversed. It has been won by one side. American homeland, this may well be so. By the assumption is the assumption about the assumption. My conclusion, and now is Ukraine war, so nuclear weapon comes again. My conclusion is that the mutually countervailing nuclear armament of Russia and the United States has not been the reason why Russia has not advanced beyond the limits established at the end of the 1940s. If I were asked, what is the government to my present subject of that what, then I believe the reason to have been, I would offer two, which are not necessarily alternative to one another. First, Russia does not want to occupy Western Europe. Second, Russia's assumption. But Russia wanted to occupy Ukraine. It often happens that in this type of inquiry, important principles are elucidated by consideration of an extreme improbability, as I have just been doing. One principle which emerged is that the only objective to which the nuclear weapon is even arguably appropriate to one which involves the literally vital interest of the user, even in the unique historical case of Japan 1945, the justification has to be based upon the avoidance of huge casualties and destruction during what would otherwise be the remainder of hostility against Japan. The last case of the use of nuclear weapons by Britain has not yet been examined. It relates to nuclear weapons so narrowly limited in their scope and the effect that they could not, even under conditions of war fever, be mistaken as evidence of using or being about or prepared to use other nuclear weapons. The mere possibility of such a mistake leads back into the chain of reasoning which we have already followed in exploring what we are and are not, the consequences of the countervailing possession of Russian and American. Fortunately, it seems to me that consideration of a I want to use a pen. Fortunately, it has been seen that consideration of the same nature of those used hitherto are sufficient to providing the answers. If, as I have already argued, the defense of Britain cannot be shown to defend upon the existence of America's nuclear weapon, I believe the answer to be yes, it would be diminished, but not critically. Obviously, if America regards Britain as a good place for nuclear bases from the point of view of Americans' perception of its own defense, it must attach additional value on that account on Britain not falling under the dominance of a hostile Europe, but there is a mirror image. On the same hypothesis, the UK would be an equally good and still better place for such an emergency to locate its nuclear weapons. I believe we can thus reach our last conclusion without recourse to military or religion. That is belief. That is a great relief, for I do not know what they would have helped us. Christianity leads us either in dead end or argument in a circle. this is a dead end. This is a dead end because the gospel does not authorize the use of arms or force at all in an argument in a circle, because the appeal to authority to authorize warfare nevertheless to an appeal to the secular authority, such as the papacy with its just war, the crown of England with its commandment of the magistrate. Morality is less precise concept than Christianity, but I shall venture to make a statement about it which might find acceptance. Whatever may be the limitations and imperatives placed upon human societies by their inner nature and outward circumstances, as a result of which war might be inseparable from the human condition, our capability of godlike reason, looking before and after, entails upon us as one of the conditions of humanity that we should apply reason to the best of our capacity, even to the consequences which flow from the irrational side of human nature. The discipline of thinking logically about war is one shape which the performance of this duty can take. Peace, politics and power. Tony Benn. So this is another editor. So this book is not written by this author, it's edited by this author. Edited. There is no doubt that at a time of writing the government is systematically misleading the people about the military balance. Anyone who thinks that this thing is never practiced by state ministers and civil servants should study the lesson of the Falkland campaign. The Ministry of Defense is admitted that deliberate disinformation was used because the military situation demanded it. Another false impression is being given, and it concerns the military balance between the US and the USSR. What is USSR? When the Catholic bishops and Anglican laymen are united with many in all our political parties and with members of the U.S. Congress in deploring the possession of nuclear weapons, it cannot reasonably be maintained that the peace movement is a communist plot. The government will not be able to succeed in its attempt to dismiss the peace movement as a bunch of extremists and traitors or a manifestation of lunatic. The peace of movement dismissed. No government, Tory or Labour, will be able to ignore such a movement for very much longer. So the government don't want peace, maybe want peace. When someone wants peace, some would argue, is it a communist plot? Unilateralism, neutralism, and pacifism. I have chosen the subject of unilateralism because I believe that the national debate about defense and security, and especially about the role of nuclear weapons, is now entering a decisive phase. What decisive phase? And as it does so, I believe that those of us whose business it is to analyze and articulate a national issue of this kind have a duty to inject some sort of realism into the debate, which tends to be disproportionately colored by idealism. Not that there is anything wrong with idealism. I suggest, however, that in the world of regenerate nation-states, many of whom are prepared to use military force aggressively in the pursuit of their political aims, aggressively. It has to be tempted as just like Putin, as the Bishop of London suggested, with a clear appreciation of the realities of power. Our potential enemies do not hesitate to exploit and corrupt our idealism. It is, I believe, largely as a result of this exploitation that these three elements, unilateralism, neutralism, and pacifism, have come to request a serious threat to the survival of what I insist on calling, in spite of protest of progressive thinkers everywhere, the free world. Let us consider first unilateralism, by which I mean the movement which advocates unilateral nuclear disarmament by the United Kingdom. Here, let me take a moment to demolish a myth which is being carefully fostered by some of the leaders of the campaign for nuclear disarmament. Then their suggestion that the distinction between unilateral disarmament and military. What is multilateral, unilateral? The unilateral is only a part of multilateralism. This, of course, a very devious and thoroughly dishonest exercise in semantics, and it should be recognized as such by anyone concerned with clarity of language and thought. Nuclear disarmament means precisely what it says, the abandonment of one side. Okay, now I know. Although I don't know what this means, now I know it is the abandonment of one side of its nuclear weapons without any simultaneously or corresponding action by the other side. Multilateralism disarmament, on the other hand, means the face simultaneously. I think Ukraine forgive nuclear weapons is like this. Now, so that's what has happened to Ukraine. It was invaded. The assumption of monopoly of wisdom is not the only distasteful facet of the monopoly of wisdom unilateral movement. There seems also to be the implication of a monopoly of moral rectitude now. And now, Powell, one of those definitive statement which leads me in reserve to wish that I would be as certain of anything as Mr. Powell is of everything. That quotation contains 5 separation. So this paper is just discussing. Don't take any position. So I feel boring about it. Let's see what he talks here. I have included neutralism in this analysis for 2 important reasons. First, it is often an explicit element in the program of unilateralism and peace movement. Second, it is in any. So he taught Christians that the church and the bomb. It is not only the Christians and that the plague on both your born houses. Heresy should be repugnant. The people of Soviet Union and its empire live in the repressive, brutal, and degrading twilight inseparable from any attempt to erect the moral square of Marxism into a political system. The important difference between our system and theirs is that they believe that the human individuals exist to serve the state. Important difference between our system and theirs is that they believe that the human individual exists to serve the state and not the state to serve the individual. Furthermore, they are committed to destroying our system and replace it with theirs. You do not have to take my word for that. You only have to read what they say themselves. Churchill once said in a different context, I accept no position of neutrality as between the fireman and the fire. The fireman and the fire, nor should free men and women accept any position of neutrality as between political democracy and totalitarian communism. This is very thought-changing moment because I was always taught in China said that the Switzerland always being neutralism, and so it is intact all through these years. Now this paper said that they don't accept neutralism. Faced with this argument, many protest that it is possible to abandon our nuclear weapons and still remain members of the Western Alliance. The point to Norway and West Germany as example. It is time, I think, that okay, that's the bishop and his colleague meet this argument by creating two new categories of pacifists in an attempt to reconcile Christian ethics with our unit argument. There are the presidential pacifists and of selective objection. It seems no set of principle, but what simply to be that believe that violence is essentially counterproductive. I am bound to say that I find this brand of casualty totally unconvincing. Okay, this is what I usually heard. Fine. So I want to. So this also has something that is very different from what I believe. So let's see what how he proves what he believes. If the pacifist in the passive position from whatever point of departure it might be arrived at were to be prevail in the West, we should be at the mercy of brute force and a hostage to any aggressor whose political ambitions included our subjugation, attempts to obfuscate facts with Jesuitical wordplay were once the subject of magisterial rebuke by the editor of the Times when I was the paper's of defense correspondent to an earnest young leader writer who had suggested that surely there were two sides to every question. The editor replied severely, "No, young man, they are not. Some things are evil, cruel, and ugly, and no amount of fine writing will make them good, kind, and beautiful." The pacifist position seems to me to be summed up in the depressing description from an American friend of a young man taking part in the demonstration on an American university campus. So this is nerd, but the reality is very brutal. You can't just believe it will be good, then it will be good. No, it's just in your imagination. Our will to sustain and defend the civilized value of our political system has been eroded by a number of contemporary ills, and the decline of moral values, a contempt for authority, the decay of contemporary ills. They consider a contempt of authority is I don't agree. I don't agree that a contempt for authority is a contemporary ill. Maybe the authority is not. Maybe the truth that authority is not trustworthy is really the better thing. Contemporary ill. The decay of the family, the pervasive cult of mediocrity. I have attempted to analyze briefly three of the principal tendencies of thought and advocacy which I believe are accelerating this process of erosion. The young men on the university campus. The young campus are not only saying there is nothing worth dying for. There's worse thing, but he was all by implication saying there is nothing worth living for. Speaking for myself, I believe for many others like me, I reject both these propositions. I think this paper is quite interesting. He has his own thoughts. He rejects pacifism because he rejects pacifism because many things can't be get by doing it. You should be you can't be because many goods can't be get by just saying it. You should fight it. And he also rejects neutralism because because he also what he said. Neutralism I include in this analysis for two important reasons. In the Soviet Union, because they are different. There are there's no position except no opposition neutral reason as between the fireman and the fire. So they cited Churchill to reject neutralism. Nor should any free man and free women to accept a position of neutralism and political democracy and totalitarian communism. So if there is a bad man, there is a good man, there is a good man, and there is a bad man. There is a good man, there is a bad man. You want to be neutral, then there will always better things in the world. You shouldn't be neutral. You should have a position that you should like this man, hate this man. So that is this author's idea. What do you think about it? And also the author also don't like. Oh, this is what I heard said. Also, the author don't like unilateralism, because unilateralism is you abandon nuclear weapons on your own side, but others don't do it. That would make you in danger. Okay, let's do this one. Peace through arms control. I have originally intended to say something about the efforts which have been and are being made to reach a more securely based on peace through international arms control agreement. The whole process is under attack from those who are impatient with what has been achieved so far and have lost faith in it as a way forward. Yet it is vital that this view does not prevail for disarmament negotiations. Okay, now I think this is critical for Ukraine and Russia. Between them, armament negotiations offer the only hope for a safe world. It is whether this view does not prevail. They are thinking about that. So the author don't think that. They are not just a matter for government. We all have a role to play, and in offering a few thoughts on arms control and doing so from the point of view of someone who tries to be a Christian, I believe it would be wrong if I did not concentrate much of my attention to the church and the bomb, the report of a work party. Okay, endorsing as it does the unilateralist position, it will be warmly welcomed by the activists. I think a unilateralism position, just like a game theory, if you are good to other people, but other people are better to you, then the better you would sacrifice more, then the better people will get more. Just the dilemma, the prisoner's dilemma. I believe that the bishop and the others who started from a non-committed position, I don't know what this word means. Let's see, have been held by their colleagues to the wrong conclusions, and that the report contains wrong, varying errors of fact, of logic, and even of theology. I am emboldened to offer views of theological issues only by the many examples we now have of theorians quite justifiable express their own opinions on politics, international relations. Let's start on the point of agreement, a view which I share totally with Bishop Baker, and what a view she shared. Let me see. Pointing out that an all-out nuclear war would be a devastating tragedy for the world. Surely no human being, certainly no Christian could challenge the assertion that the use of nuclear weapons would be an evil. Could challenge the assertion that the use of would be an evil. The use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was an evil. The bombing of London, Dresden, Coventry, and Hamburg were all crimes against humanity. The use of chemical and bacterial weapons would also be evil. The use of a piece of wood by an assailant to batter an old lady is an evil act. As Christians, as sensitive and sensible human beings. Okay, Christians are sensitive and sensible human beings. This is the first time I heard it. It is very, this is a new knowledge for me. We should lament them all. The problem in each case is usually the need to choose between various evils. This is an inescapable part of the human condition. I do not find it nearly as easy as the authors of to draw the sharp distinction that they make between nuclear arms and the rest. In the Times pointed out that nuclear weapons release radiation in a way which cannot be accurately predicted and cause both the somatic and genetic harm which would threaten future generations. I can well understand the case, particularly the Christian case, for the new renunciation of use of weapons for all kinds. So it is very dangerous. So I know it. So I don't need to read it very specifically. It says the nuclear weapon is dangerous. We know that clearly. The author of the report also recognized this dilemma. Selective objection, a variant of prudent pacifism. They have opted for the nuclear pacifism because they believe that outrage pacifism can be dangerously. Outright pacifism can be dangerously destabilizing to such a peace as does exist. Sadly, the authors are nowhere able to show that nuclear pacifism would not itself the consideration considering of how we maintain peace in neither to a welter and speculation and theory about what might happen in the future, about what other nations might react, should be we renounce nuclear weapons. The Bishop Working Party does not seem to accept this proposition. In this, I was so surprised. Is the bishop a Christian position? He also has the power to determine nuclear weapons. Is it for the government to determine it? I was so interested. The present balance of terror is plainly not a secure way of keeping the peace. It becomes more precarious month by month and will become more difficult. Still, horizontal proliferation of nuclear weapons proceeds. I would like to hear the thoughts. There is one element in the approach of the church and the bomb which I have to say I find both wrong and deeply offensive. What they find? This is a determined attempt to threat the Soviet bloc and the Western nations with total even-handedness. Honest objectivity in dealing with international issues of such fundamental importance is surely to be commended as a goal. No use. You just say very, very important, but you don't have any solution, right? To take whether he have any solution, to take any other view and to devalue Judeo-Christian values and achievement of Western societies. These societies have many blemishes and failings. They are as nothing compared with the failing of Marxism. In their assessment of the Soviet and its intentions, tell us that Russians do not want war. This is very temporary, so I'm not interested. Let's see what they said. At the United Nations Special Session on Disarmament, the organization proposed international self-monitoring arrangements which attracted considerable interest. Other initiatives and ideas are needed. I think this is so rubbish word. You have nothing to offer, so you said other needed. No fire use. Okay. It is part of NATO planning that if Russia attacked with tanks and aircraft could not otherwise be held by its force, NATO would use nuclear weapons. No first use. The doctrine of no has been discussed at a meeting. It is possible that the unlimited nuclear war would be less destructive than conventional one. In discussing the possibility of the adoption of NATO of the policy no first use, I am assuming that the UK remains part of the NATO and that those in favor of this policy should urge the British government to initiate discussions within the alliance as to its feasibility. No first use. Is it effective of no first use? If they use it, if other Russian use it first and then they destroyed us and we have just a KO'd the British, then do you think no first use still good? A much more serious criticism of the proposal is that it might increase the risk of war. Present NATO policy is that both sides recognize that a nuclear war would lead to no conceivable gain and must be avoided at all costs, and so the Russians are deterred from starting any kind of war in Europe. Under no first use, the risk to them would be smaller and they might not be deterred. Against this can be argued, as between nuclear-armed adversaries, the risk of starting any kind of war are enormous. I think only in these books, when I read these books in UK, I would see so obviously and take enemy as to Russia and China in the books that I read in UK, since completely new experience to me. There is an uncomfortable feeling that deterrence works. Any group commanding no first use to the British government should not urge that they make a declaration tomorrow or on the morrow of election victory. Seen from the point of view, the question of still, he said no first use, but the author didn't give any insight at all. I didn't think he give any insight. Yeah, let's see the last word. The snag is that one cannot be certain that the dreaded situation would not rise, but this okay. I think he didn't talk things to the point. This author only talk things detour, always not to the point. Let's read this one, the normalization of Europe. Okay, the talk was first given in a private apartment in Budapest. Invitation of peace groups of dialogue. Friends and colleagues, this is an artificial ideological chasm across our continent, and voices cannot always be heard across it. Oh, so proud. Yet, expressions of horror and goodwill alone will not prevent the outcome. Goodwill may even be a mask behind where other motives and other interests were at work. We must identify these motives and interests, and we must do so, not as partisans of one side and the other side. Let's say there is a poem. Let's sing it. Let there be harmony, order, but a true order, lest the world perish. Oh, if the world is not to perish, the people must be free to speak majestically. If the present Cold War is protracted to further 20 years, it will not inevitably lead to the final Holocaust, although it will probably do so, but it will very certainly give rise to two profound distorted economies and damaged cultures, to two opposed warlike societies ruled by leaders who are intolerant, security-minded persons, and hence to delusion of each citizen's freedom and right as against the demand of rival armed states. I just think, is it the Cold War protracted to further 20 years, not only make the Soviet Union break up, but also kill the Russian? Will the world a much better place now? So, I cannot cite with equal accuracy details from the other side of the chasm, since the matters are not so openly published in the Soviet Union, but we have it on our best authority that if the growth of weaponry in the past 20 years have been fearsome, it has been fearsome in the Warsaw Pact. Also, how is this to be done? I do not know your circumstances. I do not wish to intervene in your proper national affairs, but if the destruction of our continent is at stake, then we must consult together and act as Europeans. So our continent, Europe takes European as a continent, countries and countries together, they are at the same they are the same continent, so they have to act together, cooperate when there is a common invader. This is the only part of our logic. The second part can only be defined or rejected by you on this side. Your generosity inviting me to speak openly here tonight. Okay, so this is the end. So let's see the last word. Both sides are as fat with weapon systems as a goose. Being prepared for Christmas dinner. Okay, so fat, so will be killed. The British astronomer Royal has said that there is already enough nuclear weaponry on our continent to destroy Europe totally more than 20 times. How can it matter whether one side can do this 11 times and the other only 9 times? Once is enough, so that even on the premise of military deterrence, there is fat enough to be cut out without any risk. We are tired. We are tired of leaving our fate in the hands of the politicians. We are tired of living and the superpowers, most of them or whom are locked into the initial of the status quo. Nor would our actions endanger in any way our own nation's legitimate defense. I have already explained that these are not defensive weapons, and that bases can only invite attack. But there is another point. The systems are grossly in excess of any military needs in even the maddest of strategic scenarios. This is not just the view of some utopian that see pacifists as utopian. It is a clear judgment of senior military men and arms advisors from both sides, although they tell us this only when they have retired and are free to speak. Okay, this is very ironic. Oh, it's not the end. They have more to say. This is a reason why many parts of the Western peace movement, including and the Committee for European Nuclear Department, by which I am a member, I have been shy of direct linkage with national peace councils and committees on your side. To be plain, I do not like the World Peace Council, and we are wary of its affiliated organizations. So this just saying how important he is. When I told the meeting that I was coming to Budapest, I was asked to take this message with me. But matters. What message? I'm not interested. It must be outdated. So let's go to the end. Of course, the foreign forces in Europe today are not forces of occupation. They are still in the testimony of an abnormal and unresolved state of affairs and a heavy burden upon the resources of both superpowers. So it's a burden of superpowers. It is in the direct interest of both that it is a heavy burden of the resources of superpowers. Just as when I go to the Edinburgh Castle, there is a big cannon that is built, but it is the most advanced cannon built at that time, but it never used once. But it is consumed a lot of resources for the powerful, for their power. They're just outdated. Just like so many nuclear weapons you build but never used. So there are so many people to convert it to nuclear submarines, nuclear power stations. Reflections on the debate about the nuclear weapons. The debate. 3 pictures stand out in the history of relationship between the world's leading states since the end of the 18th century. Infrequent wars have altered with long periods of peace. Each of the wars have been nearly more demanding and devastating for all the participants than that which preceded it. At the end of each war, the leading states have made a concerted effort with each one more radical than the last, to reconstruct the international system on lines that would make them more likely to succeed. Also, they believed in avoiding a further war. In this respect, international conduct in the past 200 years have differed markedly from international conduct in all earlier times, when states were more or less continually engaged in wars which remained limited in scale. Modern international system has come to nothing. To the increasing obvious application of weapons revolution, or as of wider changes to the structure of social and capacity of government, which have also steadily raised the scale and reduced the utility of war. What is raise the scale? Why raise the scale but reduce the utility of war? What is utility of war? Since it raised the scale, should have raised the utility as well, right? Industrialized and societies and who compose them have necessarily become increasingly alert since 1943. Since the end of the Second World War, in 35 years, men have made more advances in the application of science and technology than they are made between the end of the 18th century. Leaving aside the difficulty that the conventional war they envisage is one which a state whose first-line conventional military power exceeds the combined power of all the states which will be at war with it. Neither of these arguments allow for the possibility that nuclear weapons have deterred that state from making a conventional attack, and will continue to do so. In preparation for its policy of updating the country's nuclear weapons, the government has gone some way to repairing this omission by letting it be known that it will use them to halt a conventional attack. For this last position, when a shift is so fundamental, we may be sure of 2 things. It will have been a long time in preparation once it has been made, and if it is consolidated, it will have multiple and far-reaching repercussions. That's true. It can't be a small thing. It's very serious. If we read these elaborations today, we bring away from them one unmistakable impression. They possess all the cogency, all the intellectual rigor, and all the irrelevance of the scholastic writing of the Middle Ages, and whence their relevance. The answer lies partly in the fact that they did not pause to ask whether disciplines accepted by one nuclear state would be accepted by another. Their message since then have been that should a provocation lead to war between the world's most developed state, there is no reasonable hope of avoiding massive nuclear exchanges and no possibility of providing civil defense against them. Such are the grounds of the suggesting that we are now witnessing the formation of international system which will be even more different from the modern system. That's for sure. Working for peace, British contribution to multilateral nuclear disarmament. So if you want to disarm yourself, you ask other people to disarm as well. In this context, and bearing in mind the erosion of deterrence, we can outline some of the requirements for effective global nuclear disarmament. One initial requirement might be for a comprehensive test ban treaty. Comprehensive. Do they keep their promises? British unilateral nuclear disarmament should not be regarded as an operation to be performed in isolation, a brave but ultimately useless gesture. Rather, it should be undertaken in a manner designed to have the maximal impact on the international scene and to stimulate genuine multilateral development, not fake. On the more positive side, though, there is now a high level of public concern. In many Western countries. Furthermore, there is a clear concern. There is clear concern on the part of many non-nuclear and largely aligned countries that have been promoted their views. America has the most nuclear bombs in the world, thousands. Britain should do so as one part of a massive campaign of international diplomacy and national and international education. Education. Is it propaganda? Not propaganda and education. What's the difference? It should literally make a nuance of itself among the nuclear powers, seeing this as its most significant international role in the next decade. So it's all about influence. Nuclear weapons in defense of Western Europe. If Western Europe has to be defended against anyone, it is presumably against the Warsaw Pact. Warsaw Pact. What is Warsaw Pact? So the obvious first question is, has the Warsaw Pact any intention, whatever of attacking us, or to put the same? Warsaw Pact is to attacking Europe. The question is, of course, whether these forces should be added or subtracted. There is a matter for political speculation, on which no man can know the answer in advance. When the mobilization forces on either side we added on the disparity remained, so that after mobilization, it is surely obviously that in any foreseeable conflict, in any foreseeable future, in any foreseeable concept of this type, the Soviet will be on the offensive, even they can't seriously believe otherwise. Arising from these factors, there is a very widespread view that if the Warsaw Pact did carry out a massive rolling attack across the North German plain. Okay, North German is a plain, it's not a mountain. The argument has at least the merit of recognizing one key fact about deterrence, that is, that it is never absolute. Deterrence is never absolute. Let's see, last word. A policy for the minimization of risk of any war is not a wholly bad one. And if one can have this policy, as we have in the past, for roughly the same amount of money as we spend on drink each year, then that's not a bad bargain. Roughly the same amount. So you would sacrifice your drinking to solve this problem, or you would just use more money. Are you willing? Christian ethnic and the spirit of security and deterrence. Ethics and security and deterrence. What is the Christian ethnic? One cannot fully understand the present position of influence groups in the Christian churches on nuclear war without considering the long-term moral and political resources on which they draw. These include both the pacifist tradition within so-called alternative Christianity and the varied application of natural law as elaborated by established churches, and the alternative tradition has grave reservations about all warfare, which may in the end imply a withdrawal from all political order or in political form the state, the established tradition. The idea of political law, order, and political possess pose problems for Christian faith and which overlap with the twin problem of war between nation states and the ideological war, which in the ideological war. So that presented long ago. The essential Christian transaction takes place in a worldview where time is dramatically foreshortened. Human beings as political animals. Okay, human beings are political animals. Then I lack a much part of it now. Look forward a long term in which they may achieve both possible gain and acceptable losses. They calculate in terms of a secular future, even though the contingencies of accident, disease, death, or misfortune may suddenly destroy the basis of their. May suddenly. Humans are always. They always political. Humans are so political. They always calculate, but they contingencies may suddenly change, destroy all the basis of their calculations. This is so right. So why calculate at all? So I don't lose anything if I'm not political at all. Such a system cannot be immediately presented to the imagination as they are icons of Christian faith. What is meant by this? The rule may be stated as follows. A class cannot make political decisions on an if-only basis. He cannot contradict average tendencies on the assumption that he acts with an uncalculating generosity to a sufficient number of others will act similarly, so abrogate the nature of the system. Imaginary by claiming that religion is for the individual, but in Christianity has a social dimension too. Inaugurating social, a Christian will ask, would Christ press the nuclear button? Would Christ press the nuclear button? This means that contemporary Christians often try to construct a version of political reason from the personal and the particular. These icons do not subscribe to political trajectories on chessboard, so it is not playing chess. Sometimes conservatives try to express the personal character of Christian imaginary by claiming that religion is for the individual, but Christianity has a social dimension too. Is for the individual, but also has inaugurating social experiments, including the monastic communities. Would be better to say that everyone is a better person, meditated through a personalized, particularized mode and person of Christ, the one unique and particularly heavenly city, New Jerusalem. Heavenly city, New Jerusalem. Say that everything is mediated through a personalized particularity mode. It's said that to detach religion from politics. Now this people is completely doing the opposite. However, the issue currently facing the church is not primarily concerned with limited warfare of this kind, but with the special and unique circumstances of nuclear warfare. I have reviewed the general problem of political processes. So I'm very confused, since religion should be detached from political. So what this book all is talking about, is it all rubbish? I would also say that, in my view, thinking concentrates too much on what would be morally defensible given that a nuclear war were to occur. Morally defensible were given that. Okay, I kind of have headache now, since you can't determine a political thing with religion. How this book talking about religion, culture, and anti-nuclear sentiment. So I just don't want to read this book anymore. Bye bye.